Hello campers, this is the Suburban Camper and this is a video about testing the limits of your camp supplies. I like to say one of the greatest benefits to camping in a Suburban is the ability to camp just about anywhere and be prepared for anything. This channel is all about the planning and preparation needed to enable you to achieve this premise. It's also about testing the limits of this premise, and with that in mind, I created a simple test. Can you complete a trip without restocking any supplies other than fuel for your vehicle? In other words, from the moment you depart home, if the only thing you can purchase is fuel for your vehicle, will you make it back home without purchasing any supplies other than fuel? I have to say, over the years, I have rarely done this. There always seems to be something I forgot and need once I depart, and there are certainly always things I want, such as a cheeseburger in the last town I will see for a while. But it really is beneficial to prepare as if you will be unable to restock, because you'll hopefully be in places where no supplies are available, as those are the best places. Also, if you have everything you need for an extended period of time, you can relax and spend more time doing the things you love to do. I put myself to this test on a recent 6-day, 5-night camping trip. This was a trip to remote Bureau of Land Management areas, including 2 river canyons and a desert with a mountain range backdrop. These are some of the most remote areas in the state I live in, so it was a great way to take the test, and I'm proud to say I failed the test. Yes, despite my 5-page checklist and plenty of time spent planning and preparing, I had to buy something other than fuel on day 2. This trip was mostly about exploring places I'd not been before, but I also planned on fishing. I utilize a spinning rod and reel setup for most of the fishing I do. I have gear for bigger fish such as steelhead and salmon, and gear for smaller fish such as trout and bass. I also fly fish, and on this trip I wanted to focus more on fly fishing as it has been quite some time since I've done it. I was expecting to fish for small to medium-sized trout, so my plan was to bring a light spinning rod and reel with small lures as my secondary setup, and my fly rod and reel with a supply of wet and dry flies as my primary setup. It was a long drive to the desert, so I decided to split up the trip and stay at a river canyon I camp at frequently on the first night. I arrived in the evening and I did not really have time to set up my fly rod, so I grabbed my spinning rod, which was already set up with the lure, along with my fishing vest, and headed down to the river. After several casts with no bites, I decided to change the lure and pulled out my lure box from my vest, only to discover I only had lures for bigger fish. My last fishing trip was a steelhead trip, and my vest was only stocked with steelhead gear. I forgot to restock it with lighter gear. Okay, no worries. I wanted to focus on fly fishing anyway. I headed back to camp, made dinner, and called it a night. I woke up to a beautiful morning and decided to get some fly fishing in before I departed, so I grabbed the fly reel from the fishing bin, and then I opened the rod storage tube and pulled out a section of the rod. Wait, what is this? Oh no, this is a section of a travel fishing rod I use for steelhead and salmon. Perhaps my fly rod is also in here. Nope. And this is how I failed the test. Turns out my travel rod and fly rod cases look pretty much alike, and I grabbed the wrong one. So I was fully equipped for steelhead or salmon, but I'm going to a river with no steelhead or salmon. Well, at least I have my light spinning rod, but I only have one lure. I went ahead and fished with that one lure for a bit and pondered my options. I really was looking forward to fishing in the river canyon I'll be visiting after the desert, so the only question was whether I was going to stop and buy lures or buy a fly pole. I decided on a fly pole and ended up at a fly shop in some guy's house. He was helpful and got me all set up. The irony is I did not catch a single fish with the fly rod, but I did catch a bunch of fish with that one lure, including this nice and fat smallmouth bass. I fished that lure until it fell apart, and I'm sure I made about 25 casts before I realized the hook had fallen off. I was in such a beautiful place, I did not care. As far as the rest of my camp supplies, I was in great shape. I had more than enough food and water, and when something unusual came up, like having to remove my hitch cargo carrier to make a stream crossing, I had the tools I needed to do that. I brought 50 pounds of ice, I stuffed 3 10-pound bags in my Yeti cooler, which I dedicate to ice storage, and put 2 in my Coleman cooler for my food and beverages. I probably had enough to last another night, but I think I'll stick with the guideline of 10 pounds per night just to be safe, and therefore, unless I'm willing to pack another cooler or invest in a 12-volt fridge, I know 5 nights is my limit when I only use ice to keep food and beverages cold. I brought my 5-gallon Coleman water jug along with a 7-gallon jerry can, and I utilized about 6 gallons of water, and it was not that hot, so I would say about a gallon of water per day is the minimum for me. Overall, despite failing the test, it was a great trip that tested my limits regarding remote locations and camp supplies. You can check out the highlights from this trip in the How to Find Remote Campsites Bureau of Land Management Edition video. So, are you up for the challenge? How many days and how far can you go without restocking camp supplies? Let's get some comments going on this question. If you learned something from this video, please subscribe. And if you want to learn even more about camping in a Suburban, please visit my website, suburbancamping.com. Thank you very much.